in the realm of consciousness, it seems possible to have like flashes of goodness, right? It's like this seems to be more of a physical thing than a metaphysical thing, because in the metaphysical realm, you can have that like an epiphany and a surge of bliss coursing through your veins, and ASMR, right? Like the tingly feeling going down your spine, and it's just really, it's an interesting contradiction that your mind can give you the illusion of a flash of light, but there is no like explosion of life in the physical realm, but there is in the metaphysical realm.
The Yoga Connection with Zorananda is a deep dive into the world of yoga, exploring the rich history of tradition, methodology, and practices both ancient and modern. Follow along as yoga is explored through solo episodes to guest interviews to understand its vast reach around the world. So welcome everybody to the Yoga Connection. My name is Zorananda, and I'm here today with none other than Zarnoosh. He's been a regular on the show since the dawn of the podcast. I think it's been like 4 years, almost 5 years now. And yeah, he's been a great guest. I'm happy to have him on again. We are going to dive into all the great things that he has planned today and he wants to get into. And, Zarnoosh is a music producer and a musician. We've had conversations about Zoroastrianism and his upbringing. And I think today we're going to dive into some concepts just related to music and, of course, getting into the connection with yoga and spirituality. But, welcome, Zarnoosh. How's it going?
Hello, Zorananda. It's great to be back. Another rotation around the sun.
Yes,
Always
sir.
a pleasure.
Oh, yeah. So what is on your mind today, my dude?
Oh, man, where to start? Well, lately I've been thinking a lot about how natural disasters tend to be quick at destroying peace, but we don't really have the reverse of that in nature, right? We don't have like large scale transient events of like light, but we seem to have large scale transient events of darkness, right? And so we have natural disasters, but we don't have like natural utopias, right? Like imagine like a flash, the opposite of a flash of lightning, like a flash of generating a forest, overnight, or like fixing a city. And I was just really been pondering about how like, you can quake a meadow, but you can't meadow a quake.
That's interesting. That's actually pretty trippy to think about, because you're right. Because, in a blink of an eye, a landslide can just come out of nowhere and just demolish a town, right? I know there was a town just near the Rocky Mountains in Alberta here that in the 80s, that's exactly what happened. Landslide came and just these massive boulders just came and totally wiped out this town. So something that would take, if you think about what it takes to build anything, right? Let alone a town that can house like, 30,000 people or something, that you're looking at decades worth of work to chop down the trees, to mill the lumber and build the houses, build the infrastructure, the roads, like everything is just taking so much time. And then all of that is undone immediately. Just the earth just sends this destruction upon everything. What do you think it would take for the opposite to happen? Like, why don't we have just like a sudden flash of like extreme goodness, or that is gonna, like, say in like the aftermath of like a massive fire, like what's happening in LA, right? Like this fire is just going to roll through everything and burn down thousands of acres, and then why isn't there anything behind it that's like, oh, okay, well, this is what can magically happen to, fix everything.
Yeah, I guess the way I've been processing it, man, is like good things happen to those who wait. Like I guess like good seems to take its time, but evil is quick,
Mm.
right? And usually it's in, like, I think as far as the universal laws and the natural processes are concerned, it's in the wake of that transient destruction that the growth comes, right? So like a forest fire, and then the ashes enrich the soil, and then you get a new bustling forest growing stronger than the one that lay there before. So I think there's something there that like the destruction, which is quick, is the reset that leads the way for new good things to take the place.
Yeah, and like that's weirdly cryptic too, right? Like, and as much as we want to think that the devastation is so bad, right? That it's like, um, why is it that you're going to spend so much time building something and putting so much energy into um, this creation just for something totally out of your control to come and destroy everything? And why are we living in a reality where that's the balance of things?
And
Um,
in every department, like as above, so below, right?
yeah,
Like you and I are artists and musicians. We spend hours and hours, sometimes weeks, months, even up to years working on a song or two. And potentially. And then, if there's a crash or something happens to the hard drive, knock on wood, like this can all go away in a flash. Like it's a really fascinating thing. Or like ants spend so long building their complex ant hills, and then we can just accidentally walk in it and destroy it in a flash. Like it's really quite an interesting thing how quickly bad things happen and how slowly good things happen.
yeah, and I wonder if like the utility of that um, is kind of I want to say like forced upon us, as like almost like a law, right? It's like we are born into this world seemingly with built-in properties of like whatever your physical laws are of gravity and energetic exchange and stuff that we innately abide by those rules and those laws, and there's really no way out of it seemingly. But there's this force that can almost seemingly sidestep that, right? Where like we as the humans that are building the thing, like the condition is, okay, well, if you want this house to be built, this is what you have to do to build it, and this is how long it's going to take. You can't just like sidestep the governing physical laws and just be like, actually, you know what, this house is built right now, I'm not going to wait, and it has everything that I planned in the blueprints, and like there's not a single skip step. But then the opposing force is there's this like earthquake that can happen, there's this fire that can happen, there's this like landslide that can happen and totally undo everything. And like to me, that is more so humbling than anything, right? I think those are the reminders that it's like, as much as we think we're in control of what's happening on this planet, there are forces greater than ourselves that we just cannot comprehend that are going to affect us, and we just have to accept that.
I think so. And I think another interesting contrasting addendum to that observation is in the realm of consciousness, it seems possible to have like flashes of goodness, right? It's like this seems to be more of a physical thing than a metaphysical thing, because in the metaphysical realm, you can have that like an epiphany and a surge of bliss coursing through your veins, and you know ASMR, right? Like the tingly feeling going down your spine, and it's just really it's an interesting contradiction that your mind can give you the illusion of a flash of light, but there is no like explosion of life in the physical realm, but there is in the metaphysical realm.
Hmm. Yeah, it's trippy to think about because it seems like there's like an elusiveness, right? And if we're starting to narrow down into what it is that we're pointing towards, right? So we're looking first at this grand scheme of force of living on a planet that's in a galaxy, that's in a universe, and as just the individual human that's living its life, doing everything that we can to build and be creative and use the resources that we have, to just be up against these universal forces and these planetary forces that can bestow upon us just an intensity of suffering and misery that what are we looking at, and is there a way to have an understanding of that energy that's more internalized? And I think that's kind of like what you're pointing towards in the metaphysical sense, that in the wake of destruction, you're seeing this force just immediately act upon itself in a way that then, if we were to look at harnessing that energy in some way and bestowing a great light, that it's more of an internal thing.
Absolutely, man. And isn't that juxtaposition so fascinating? Like, there is this weird, mysterious conundrum to it all, and the answers seem to lie in these opposing forces.
Yeah, I'm just gonna pause for a second. We're gonna be cut off soon because I forgot that I disconnected my Zoom Pro, but I'll just keep it recording on my end, and I'll just patch it together. So yeah, so we'll probably get booted off, and then I'll re-invite you. I know it's gonna be annoying, but kind of have to do that this way.
No worries, man.
Yeah, so looking at these forces and internalizing it, and having the opportunity to inspire ourselves to kind of like embody like a great light that can be like given into the world, where like, say there isn't a natural way like a landslide would, that there wouldn't be this like natural opposing like wave of goodness, that we are the ones responsible for it, kind of sounds like.
Yeah, and in a way, I guess that is natural.
Mm-hmm. And so I wonder, because like I've been thinking about like a lot of yoga philosophies. Like in my solo podcast episodes, I've been exploring the yamas and niyamas in Ashtanga yoga, and I'm getting to brahmacharya. So my next episode will be brahmacharya, and brahmacharya is like very much this idea where we look at the influx of the inflow and outflow of energy, and like a lot of the times our energy is going out into the world. It's very exothermic. It's like everything about us is engaging in the world and putting energy out into the world, where brahmacharya is like, okay, now let's flip that, and all the energy that you're putting out into the world, we need to actually like rein it back in and bring it inside of ourselves. And there's this idea that there's a level of protection that comes about that the more that we can harness our energy in, the more we can really focus on building up our capacity, that there's a concentration that occurs. And in that concentration, it creates like a kind of like protective bubble around us. So then we're like protected from things. So I wonder if like these natural disasters that are happening in certain parts of the world is that like there's a break in protective energies.
Yeah,
And
too
so
much
then like
output.
so like the populace kind of gets vulnerable to something happening from the natural world that is a sign that's saying, hey, you need to learn how to actually like protect yourselves better from attracting these things in. And that's hard to kind of say, you know. I'm sure people, if you're talking about like like the Palisades fire, it's like, well, how do you fucking protect from that, right? And I think there's levels to it of our understanding, like as an individual, what are you doing to protect your house and make sure everything's all good? Then on a societal level, like what are you doing as a group of people in a community to protect yourselves from these kind of things? And, you know, when I look at the yoga world of philosophy, especially brahmacharya and bringing your energy in, that I do think if you were to have a large group of people who are practicing these things with the awareness that they are building their energy capacity for a protective sense, that I wonder then if like that group will see less kind of natural disasters. They'll see less invading, you know, cosmic forces, because from their divinity and humanity, they're actually producing this protective kind of sense of like aura.
I mean, absolutely. I think this lines up with that yogic philosophy that you mentioned you were going to be speaking about on your next solo episode. Because when I think of LA, I mean, historically, LA is like the epicenter of output, of like putting energy out, right? Like that's what Hollywood is. And so I'm not saying, like, I don't want to jump to any conclusions here, but it does kind of sound like what you're saying, right? And I think another thing that you touched upon was like this concept of logic versus intuition, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
logically, what can we do as people in the physical realm using like our rational senses and logic to like, you know, use better materials so something like that in the future doesn't have the same effect. But there is this metaphysical thing as well of like a hive of people, you know, trying to be heard as opposed to listening. And does that have some sort of a supernatural effect on the balance of the natural state of things?
Yeah, I think because that leads into like the meditation effect. I remember like years ago, David Wilcock did this whole like article and whole thing about the meditation effect and how it was tested out with these group of meditators, and that like globally crime levels went down just after this like large group of people.
Cool.
Like I don't know what the number was. I think it was like 10,000 or like 20,000 people who were specifically got together to meditate and see what happens. Um, and so
Fascinating.
and so yeah, I'm under the impression that when you have a particularly potent set of spiritual practices, that it's going to have an effect on the world around you. And so what I think is interesting when you look at like the Abrahamic religions, so like Judaism, Christianity, Islam, is that they all share this like coming Messiah prophecy. And what they also share is an awareness and a knowledge that in order for the Messiah to come, the earth has to be in like great turmoil. Like there has to be a reason for this like biblical figure to come
Mm-hmm,
and to
mm-hmm.
save people. And so there's this idea that the head pundits, so like the Pope and the Imam and like head rabbis, they are orchestrating calamities, like world event calamities, and they are a part of wanting to create more chaos and more travesties with the idea that it's going to quicken the timeline for this Messiah to come, because they all have
I
like a
certainly hope not, man. That's a
yeah.
terrible thing.
And
That's terrible.
because I remember there was I think it was like an interview. There's a video with Netanyahu in the 80s with a rabbi, and this rabbi is talking about like the coming Messiah, like things have to be like amped up, so so then I wonder if being the as human beings, like being the drivers of the creation of reality on this planet, right? Like without us, nature just stays nature, like there's no animal that can do what we do in shaping the planet into what it has, even over the last like 200 years, right? So it's strange to think about these world kind of catastrophic events, and then you have these groups that are wanting to amplify those kind of events for their own like personal fulfillment of prophecy. And so where my mind goes is like, okay, well, if you have these groups that are doing this and they're open about it, like this isn't some conspiracy, like it's literally in their Bible, like it's in their books that the coming of Christ is going to come when the 4 horsemen show up or whatever, and there's Armageddon and the apocalypse, whatever. And so where my mind goes is like, can we do the opposite? So then rather than waiting for the Messiah to come, can we be the Messiah for ourselves, group together in being loving people, do these practices that protect ourselves, and bring in an energy that then prevents these calamities from happening?
Absolutely. I mean, we're doing it right now. It's
Yeah,
happening
I
before
think
our
so.
eyes. I think we're going through that. And it's been so fascinating with me to see this like resurgence of spirituality, right? And again, I think like just to define what I perceive as spirituality is just a more universal kind of perspective where we're not like labeling God as God, but we're seeing like the infinity as God, right? And I think it's happening before our very eyes. People from all ages, creeds, of socioeconomic backgrounds. It's been a pleasure for me to see, and conversations are getting easier. But there's like this contrasting energy where, as we grow, right? I think I've been super in mixing mode with my music recently. So this is a great analogy. Like, so I spent the last week mixing one of my upcoming singles, and like every day just hours and hours and hours on the same thing. And as right when and I went back and I heard the demo, the kind of starting point of the idea, and it's chock full with imperfections, but there was like a homogeneity to it, right? But then as I'm going along this mixing journey and I'm like getting rid of imperfections, the few remaining imperfections start to really stick out like a sore thumb. It's like having, a perfect windshield, but then there's one little crack, and then you're just drawn to that crack. Your mind tends to hyper focus on the imperfection, and the more perfection there is in contrast to the and I think I'm noticing that on a societal level, where overall we seem to be like expanding into a higher frequency as a species, which is amazing. But the ones who are struggling to get out of that fixed kind of autopilot, I am who I am, there's no point in trying to change me mindset, um, they're like really standing out, and they're really like they're quite so I feel like that contrast is important, but it's kind of hard to see. Like, I really do struggle. Like, I can almost tell instantly whether somebody is like asking the deep questions or if they're on autopilot. and it's hard, man. I tend to struggle with that, and I'm at the place in my journey where I'm like exiting out of my misanthropic phase where I was like angry. Like I feel like I started loving people, then I grew this deep anger because I realized most people weren't loving people, and then I pitied people, but now I'm like returning back to loving people, and in spite of the pain that
Hmm.
they throw at me, especially, you know, and I think but overall it's trending in such a positive place that I think what you're saying is happening. I think we're starting to protect ourselves and expand outwards, and it I don't want to it's like Trump wanting to make Canada a state, right? Like really if you zoom out, eventually at one step of the journey, we're going to have to come together in a collective unity no matter what, like whether there's a natural disaster that forces us to get off the planet, whether climate change is a thing, and like eventually we're going to have to do something about it, and it's going to involve us coming together, right? Because the way we have it set up right now is that different nation states tend to have access to the experts within that nation state, right? Like, so for example, there's this thing they say in Canada, all the best doctors go to the States because America can afford to pay them better there with the private healthcare. And I think, if we all came together, that then we have access, like if the whole world came together, and I don't know how to do that in a way that's not evil, right? Because we tend to think that can only be done evilly. But if we can find out a way to not do it evilly, then the whole world has access to the best doctors and the best scientists and the best engineers that the whole world has to offer. And eventually we're going to need that. So I think it's interesting seeing all this pushback and like kind of nationalism come out, because that just fosters separation. And I don't think there's any elegant way towards unity. Like it's going to be a rough and bumpy kind of road for political and societal unity. But whatever it is, man, like the infighting has to stop.
Yeah, and I like to think about something from the Law of One. So in the Law of One, Ra talks about the law of confusion. So that there's this like kind of unknown law as a human in this world, that is the law of confusion, and that it's like built into our system, into the like simulation, so to speak, that like there almost can't be a complete polarization into a full utopian positive sense of living, um, because of the dichotomy between light and dark that is inherent in the system. And that
Mm-hmm.
dichotomy creates this confusion. And the confusion is,
Yes.
where do I go? Like,
Yes.
and
The
um,
balance is more important than the utopia. That balance between the two is the
yeah.
important thing.
And that's like the tragedy of where we are and what we live in, where you're going to have pockets of extreme contrast, right? Where like you go to some countries in the Western world and it's beautiful. The streets are super clean and like everything is all good. Everything's super smooth. There's social programs. There's the government works really well. And then you go to the flip where it's complete chaos, and they basically, whatever country that is, they are living in Armageddon. Like they're living in a post-apocalyptic world at the same time, and that there's this law of confusion where like that unsettling feeling has to be there, and it's part of our evolution of which way do we evolve into. Do we evolve into a more like self-serving person where we're completely selfish, we don't care about anyone, it's only about ourselves, and we'll stab anybody in the back, and we'll be a part of like that destructive force, and we benefit from it, right? Like think of like companies like BlackRock, where like they need war to happen because then they are the ones that are contracted to go in and rebuild everything, and so they want destruction. They want all these countries being demolished so that they can come in and like use up all the taxpayer money to build all the shit. Where, you know, what it takes to be on the other side, where as just like an individual, it's like, what do you do about that? um and that's why through that law of confusion that you can go to another part of the world and create like your own personal utopia. Like there's, you know, tropical places all over the world, and there's all types of communities even in the cities that we're in, right? Like you can tap into communities within your local sphere that are doing something completely different, and they're finding their support in it, and, you know, building up that protective energy so that where you are as a person, you're not going to see the calamities, you know?
Yeah, man. And I think it's like this also harkens back to this kind of mindset I have about the East meets West, roughly, where I really believe that the West has like, and I may have touched on this before in the past, but I really think this is an important detail of the current state of affairs for us as a species and the infinite, you know, and that is that I feel like on Earth, the Eastern cultures tend to live in close proximity, right? There's not a lot of space. So everybody's really, really close. Like I was born in India, and in India, like, man, there's just people everywhere and stuff going on. So I feel like, you know, yoga and, you know, Hinduism and a lot of the religious practices there and spiritual practices over there are really tied to going inside yourself and like finding like a safe space within yourself, because you don't have that luxury, because there's just like 1,000 people around you all the time, like cram. Like I think there was in India, I think yesterday, in the last couple of days, there was like a stampede in New Delhi or something, right? And like I think 10 people were killed because of this stampede, which is like when we think of stampedes, we think of a herd of animals. Well, that's just how much life there is there, right? And you're on the equator, the sun's hitting. So there's just like a lot more flora and fauna, and that applies to humans too. There's just a higher density of life. So in a place with a higher density of life, in order to balance that out, you have to be able to stay inside of your personal, because there's no kind of concept of a personal bubble over there
No,
like there is
not
in
at
the
all.
West. So you have to go within to create that personal bubble, right? But then in the West, right, we've got things like clean streets and organized society and like these really structured systems that keep us safe and allow us to like advance technology. Like we have Uber Eats and all these fascinating things we've created over here to make, you know, life kind of easier in the physical sense. But there's a lot of hyper individuation. Like there's a lot of pushing, like the kids 18 now, they're independent and we're not going to help them. They need to learn how to solve their own problems. And there's like too much space between the people, which again, I think is logical, right? Like in Canada, it's a cold climate. So it was advantageous to some of our predecessors over here to be more isolated, because it's easier to take care of a fewer people in a colder climate. Whereas if you go to like South America or something closer to the equator, you don't have to like struggle to find food and shelter. You're hungry, just kind of reach over and grab the mango or the banana, right? Like, so I think there's this thing, what I'm trying to say, where the West has mastered logic and rationalism and practicality, and the East has kind of mastered intuition and the heart, right? And it's like, I think in order for us to advance to this next state of consciousness, we kind of need a little bit of the heart of the East and the logic and the mind of the West. And if we can balance those out,
Hmm.
we're going to advance really quick to that next place we need to get.
Yeah, and you know, speaking in hypotheticals is tricky, right? Because we're dealing with so many people now. You know, like the planet has like over 8 billion people, and um, and so, you know, if you were to think of Earth as a ship and where it's being steered, and the major players in the world that are either a part of just like legacy families and bloodlines of people that, you know, have
Like the
been a,
Black Rocks.
yeah, and um and to like as an individual taking in everything that's happening and having a sense of, you know, a duty, like as your own individual person, of like, okay, well, if I'm aware that there are these companies and there are these major players, and you know it's all about power and money, and what it takes to be influential, is there a way to have an impact that's not a part of that game? And this is something that like I've been really thinking about a lot, with understanding like spiritual presence, and you know, going deeper into realms that are just unseen, where I do think the world that we live in, is there's gatekeepers in how the planet itself and the collective of all the people kind of move forward and evolve as humanity. And when it's, you know, brought down to the individual sense, that the ones who vie for power eternally here, they really are the slaves. They're the ones stuck here, and their families and whoever their cohort is going to basically, they're in their utopia. And for us, seeing that there's an opportunity to be in a better world, like we have this vision for humanity that's like, well, you know, like we want there to be no wars. We don't want there to be starvation and massive cataclysms, and, you know, religions that vie for destruction for their messiah to come, and scientists who are completely heartless and atheistic, and they just will do whatever it takes to, you know, further their studies and further their theories. And even if it means like unleashing viruses onto the populace, like whatever it is, right? That, you know, as just like a regular human, that you're not a part of that stuff. It's like, is it possible to learn deeper spiritual practices and to connect with ourselves, and to actually covertly underground kind of steer the ship without these like major players even knowing that they're just like, they're so invested in their game and in their control, that is it possible for these networks to start to come out from the woodwork and to go, okay, no, enough is enough. The way that you're vying for power actually doesn't work anymore. It's all an illusion. And then the way that the planet is directed into a greater sense of itself is actually just through like grassroots connections. And yeah, I think I've always thought like music festivals play a huge like role in that, especially like a lot of like, yeah, a lot of like the dance music festivals that have like some connection to spirituality. But yeah, I think hopefully that makes sense what I said.
No, it totally makes sense, and I think it makes me think of the revolution will not be televised, right? I don't know if you've ever heard that
Yeah,
one, but
yeah.
right, and I think it does. It is what happens, right? Because like, you know, I just, if we think about from the perspective of the West, so not objectively, but just from the perspective of the West, subjectively, from our lifestyle over here, the most dastardly societies on earth, right? Like they have a heart, right? Like, you know, you think about a lot of these battlegrounds in the Middle East, and then you have like American soldiers talking about how like the kids, they're two boys, they're friends, and they're holding hands. Like there's like
Hmm.
there there is kind of that happens, and I think this harkens back to that natural balancing of light and dark, right? Like, so no matter how much the dark forces try to snuff out the light, the lotus will spring in the mud. And I think that happens everywhere, right? So, like, and I think that's what I was trying to touch on when I was bringing up the heart and mind was that, you know, in these more destitute societies that are not necessarily as organized as us, like the infrastructure is shoddy. There's a lot of homelessness and drug addicts and like corruption and what have you. There's also a lot of heart. Like there's a lot of community. Like we can't even really conceptualize over here in general. And I also think I mean I would decree that no one has access to utopia on earth. Like they may these families that kind of live their own version of reality where they never have to worry about resources. um I think they have their own sort of curses that balances out. Like
Oh yeah,
I
for sure.
imagine I'm bro, I mean I just imagine like I can imagine that if I had the ability to do anything I wanted to, buy anything I wanted to at all, that would get bored, man. Like every upgrade I've ever had in my life, eventually I get to a place where it normalizes. I find myself taking it for granted and yearning for more. And I don't know if that's built into the system, societally through, the dark overlords, or if it's built into, the system of just like what it is to be an entity. But I overall do think light is good, bro. Like I just always go back to the fact that I was watching this awesome TikTok video that was like talking about how, according to new information and data from the James Webb Telescope, scientists have theorized and astronomers have theorized for a long time that the Milky Way galaxy is in a particularly large void of the universe. And according to these new photos from the James Webb Telescope, that is like leaning towards what it looks like, that our particular galaxy is in a particularly empty part of the universe, of space as we know it. And then within our galaxy, Earth is in a particularly empty part of the galaxy, right? And so
Mm.
the fact that we're in this super void, and then there's like this gorgeous blue orb perfectly attuned for life to thrive, but it's mostly just absence of life. Like the rarity of that, man, in and of itself tells me that it's good, and like good like wants to bloom, right? So I don't
Hmm.
think these guys who are trying to manipulate society, I don't think like all of them have to suffer with like a phone battery that dies eventually. Like there's certain things they can't escape, right? Like and and then they get used to having access to anything they want, but what they really want is like deeper connection. But I don't know if they can actually have that. Like, so I just don't think there's anyone who's living in utopia. And I think those guys like actually fall victim to their own ploys all the time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think it's always going to be a fallacy, right? And the desire for like a kind of utopia to live in is driven by fantasy. It's something that we have within our hearts and within our dreams to live in a state of being that is completely free from suffering. And, you know, that's why we have Buddhism. Like, that's the response to overt materialism.
Precisely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Precisely that.
Right.
He was a
To,
big Buddha. You're talking about the OG who was,
yeah.
everybody knows the story, lived a life
Yeah.
of luxury and walked away from it.
And so, when I think about just even for me, like my place on this planet and why I'm even here, like I have regular moments where I look at my hands, I look at myself, and I'm like,
Whoa.
yeah, like it's built in us to normalize having a body. We can't really think outside of what it would be like not to have a body. And so
Until you
we
have an
are,
ego death, though, I think.
yeah, right. And
important.
most people don't have that though, right? Like their
Correct.
sense of self is so tied to the body that they are operating. And so to exercise some sense of awareness that like, okay, as a conscious being with awareness that is piloting this body, what greater purpose do I have with it? And when you look at just your own life and what natural limitations there are, like, the city that you're born in, the parents that you have, the opportunities that you have, and what it takes to better your situation day in, day out, that is a part of your spiritual evolution. Like, people are like, I think what happens is that when you start to read a lot of like Eastern philosophy and a lot of the practices of basically removing yourself from the material world, there's suddenly this view of your personal life and what you're doing as insufficient, right? It's like, well, the job that I have, or, the girlfriend or boyfriend that I have, or the family that I have, it's just like, it's suddenly everything is so, like dreary, but
dull.
like super mundane and dull, but the
NPCs.
and I think to like develop the sense of really what it means to have a deeper spiritual sense is that you're moving through that. So you're allowing yourself to fulfill those karmas and to see it as like a video game. It's like, oh, this is just a level in this game that I have to like win at. And how do I win at it?
The mundane, man.
Yeah. Do I win at it by complaining and bitching about it and feeling sorry for myself and quitting my job every 6 months and finding a new apartment every year and like, and like being abusive? Like, is that winning the game? Maybe on the self-serving side, and like you're gonna spiral in a direction that is gonna like cause a more negative orientation. Or are you here to realize that it's all about the upward spiraling of your evolution? And so that when you look at your placement here and you're to compare it with like, the world elite and the royalty, and like, okay, they have these like massive mansions on these properties and they have them all over the place. They can take private jets to wherever they want. They own their own islands. They own cities, like all this shit, right? And then you look at just like, poor old little me living in an apartment in the city. It's like you have a level of freedom that they abandoned, right? That freedom of simplicity, that freedom of like, I'm not tied to the bullshit of like being manipulative and being a narcissist, right? And so then to see how you can develop yourself from where you are is the spiritual path that you're on. And the way that you win is by simply enjoying the entire process.
Surrendering. You win by surrendering to your life. Yeah, man. Like, I love it. Bring me the chaos, man. Like, in the chaos, I grow stronger. There's not been one obstacle life has thrown at me that eventually I haven't overcome. And I think that's the same for most of us. But I think it's really, really easy. Like, from an evolutionary, like, let's take the materialistic, rational, atheistic perspective for a second. From an evolutionary perspective, like, it's hardwired into us to focus on the things that we don't like or that we feel as wrong, because it's a survival mechanism. Like, if we don't notice, like, we have a sense of pain, so we know that there's something up with our body. So I think some people start to identify as that suffering and start to like hyper fixate on the suffering, and then they compare themselves to like other people's masks, which seem devoid of suffering and seem like they're managing the suffering, but they're just kind of manipulative people who are able to pretend like they have no suffering, but really behind closed doors, they're suffering the most. And I think that, like, so the whole thing, and then this is where the Black Rocks and the political leaders jump in to kind of nurture that in the general populace, right? And to tell them this is what is right, this is what is wrong. And they're creating these dichotomies everywhere. But again, I think we're rising above that, man. I think even right now, you and I are doing the work of expanding this thing in the right direction just by even like the openness to have this conversation. Like it wasn't there before. In fact, in my day to day life, people would have tuned out by now, changed the topic, talked about
Yeah.
the latest trend, you know. And so, yeah, man, I remain super, super, super hopeful, and I just look at this thing as a whole. And within my life, the world has gotten better. So I can't imagine that it hasn't been sneakily getting better this whole time.
Yeah, I think so too. And to me, it speaks on this like gradual ascension that we're undergoing, and that we're on this
Mm.
upswing of ascending. And that it's through a cycle that is, stretches over thousands of years. So we're not going to really see the fruits of it um, in our generations. And so it's really about planting the seeds so that as humanity goes forward, the newer generations have the capacity and the ability to advance themselves even quicker and quicker. And so I think like right now we're doing the laborious work and setting the foundations for what future generations of humanity can actually experience as, quickened ascension. And that's what I feel like what my purpose is on this planet. It's like to help start to bring the awareness that you can grow as a human being and you can evolve as a human being, and you can make particular changes that can advance your sense of self and your sense of consciousness greater than any time before. And that's having the tools that we have with, let's say, with like music and sound work and meditation and breath work. And I think this could be a good segue into your idea that we were talking about off camera of like the sonoluminescence, of like what that is, of like, can we utilize something in our life that usually is for entertainment but can be shifted into a tool that can actually advance our awareness. And thinking of like this like particular experiment of a I'll let you explain this because it's your idea, but yeah, I wonder if that makes sense to kind of steer into.
Yeah, that was a perfect segue. Absolutely, man. So sonoluminescence, it's the emission of light from imploding bubbles in a liquid when excited by sound. So it's this crazy phenomenon in physics. It's also amazing that us as humans even we were able to catch this and find this hidden mystery. We're so awesome, man. But yeah, we can use sound to collapse air bubble underwater. And when the air bubble collapses, there's a flash of light, which is just a crazy phenomenon that we've just barely explained. And it really, it really has me thinking like, what is the power of sound? And there's been so many experiments, right? I think about there's this Japanese dude, the Japanese dude with the plants. And then I don't know if you've heard about this experiment. He had three plants. One of the plants he would ignore. Another one of the plants he would like say
Oh
mean
yeah.
stuff to. And then another one of the plants he would say positive stuff to. Well, the one he said um, positive stuff to, like thrived and grew and had beautiful flowers and was standing up tall. The one he said mean stuff to kind of grew but was like mutated and like not really blooming and was not doing too great. And then the one he completely neglected barely even grew at all, which even that as a side note I find so fascinating that it wasn't the one that was overtly criticized and screamed at that suffered the most. It was the one that was just left to
Hmm.
her own devices or his own devices that suffered the most. But there's these crazy magical effects of sound um, that if our tone and our choice of words and our intention behind our communication can have such an effect on plants. And then there was another one about the water and snowflakes. It was a similar experiment. I think it might have even been the same Japanese scientist, and he was like talking nicely to snowflakes, and then they would like have more beautiful shapes based on how that water was talked to. It's a very fascinating thing, and it really gets me thinking about like music, right, as a whole and sound as a whole, because music wasn't like always a form of entertainment for like most of our lives as a species. Music was just like tied into spirituality, right? Like it was just part of like praying, and most of the ancient prayers have like a beauty to them. In fact, the Western 12 tone scale like comes from like church music, like Western church music, right? And there seems to have been this corporatization, this almost this bastardization of what music is, where you have these like kids who are being out of nowhere, they're just like blossoming into these beautiful, rich music careers at the age of 19 with no like deeper understanding of the power they hold and the words they're choosing and the melodies they're choosing. And yeah, I think we need to like harken back to this ancient concept of sound and music and spirituality. And if we can like kind of reclaim that, like the goal of music shouldn't be to be rich and successful, but it should be to like achieve this sonoluminescence.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think pretty much from the onset of like the Baroque era. So like if you were to look at, you know, the periods of music, um, you're going from, especially in Western music, it's like medieval, Baroque, I think, Renaissance, Romantic, Classical, that there was a huge amount of control on music in the medieval times from the church. And it was largely because they wanted to avoid layering harmonies to create the tritone. So the tritone is this like dissonant combination. It's like where you get like diminished chords from. And so when you look at the transition from the medieval to the Baroque, you have someone like Johann Sebastian Bach, who is initiating the first sense of harmonies by doing, instead of just like one basic line of a melody, that he's starting to layer, and he's starting to prove that like, okay, you can avoid these tritones, you can start making more complicated music, that it arrives all the way to people like Mozart and Beethoven, where they are creating like, you know, up to 7 lines of harmonies of different instruments. And you know, and I think what is in the realization of that is, you know, the construction of music and the construction of sounds and creating these beautiful pieces, has a particular effect, not only on consciousness, but then on society as well. Where, you know, I watched this like really interesting video of, in the 1800s, that there was this composer that was playing in, I think, in England, and it all had to do with like being tied together with this catastrophic event that, and I think it like it was the summer of winter. I think there was like this event that happened in the 1800s where, like England went through like 2 years of winter, and it was like the weirdest thing. It just like came out of nowhere that, they didn't have any summers for like 2 years. And it was all preceded by this, concert. I want to say Brahms. I think it was like Brahms. And that there was this like kind of like secret knowledge of what, like this certain type of music can do to affect things. And it's like it's super far out there conspiracy, but I think it lends to this idea of like what sonoluminescence is like if we are 70% water and we have this like pressurized system and we can create sound, that is it possible that within us we have these like little collapsing bubbles that is creating light, and that if we are to get together in groups and sing harmonies, that are we like collapsing sound into light? I wonder if that sonoluminescence is just happening within us, and it's happening on such a small scale that it's imperceptible, right? It's a part of our nervous system, it's a part of our fascia, it's a part of like the water that's in us. And so if we gather people together in like a stadium and we're getting tens of thousands of people singing the same thing, all vibing together, where there's like a harmonization between all these like bursts of light, and you embed an intention. So think about like the whole thing about like The Weeknd, or like you name it, like these huge performers that are putting like very obvious satanic messaging out, and you have that embedded in the music, and then you have everybody singing the same thing, and so like all this energy is being let off from all these people with this intention embedded in that energy, and it's going off, you know, into the world, where then, you know, is it possible that on the other side of that, where if you were to have large groups of people who are meditating together, doing sound work, embedding more overt positive affirmations into the energy, that the release then would have a greater positive effect?
Oh, for sure, man. Absolutely. Like if all 8 billion of us did like a weekly 10-minute ohm, like we'd fucking like evolve into super beings or something great. We would draw in all the aliens from the denser parts of the galaxy. Like some crazy shit would go down. The Earth would just like explode into a explosion of trees and fruits and oasis. It would be amazing, man. Yeah, I think. How do we get that going? How do we, who's ready to sign up for the Earth-wide Ohm?
Earth-wide Ohm.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I think it's us. I think we got to do it, man.
I think we should do it, man. What a great imagine we could get every single human to do an Ohm.
Yeah.
What would we do? What the hell would happen, man?
And it's trippy to think is when you like think about Facebook, right? Like there are 2.5 or there's 3 billion people that use the platform, you know? And what would it take for Mark Zuckerberg to just send a message to everyone that's like Earth-wide Ohm on Saturday?
It would happen, man. I imagine walking out and hear, oh my goodness, dude, And so they have the power to do great good, and they don't, and that's interesting.
And that's where I think it's because like at that level of operation, there are these gatekeepers, you know, that are like that are totally unseen, and that are in communication with these people, and they're like, here's things that you just can't do. And I think it's because of this like law of confusion and this play between polarity that like, you know, if the more positively orientated side of the universe were to be like, okay, well, we're just going to do this thing and make everybody awaken, then the more negative side of it's like, wait. Like, why do you get to do that, but we can't make everybody evil? So then there's like this play between the two sides that's like, okay, well, we can do this so much of this, and then you do so much of this, and then you do so much of that. And I think it's just the arena that we're in on this planet, like with just specifically this realm, that's how things play out. And
it's a battle for consciousness for sure. We're super in a war right now. Yeah, 100%.
And you know, and what it takes to apply the self-awareness to basically choose a side. It's like, you know, through that law of confusion, I think that's why that's there. It's like, we're going to be pushed and pulled in directions without really knowing it, right? Like we're going to be on the whim of, being super angry and being abusive, and we don't really know why. We just think to ourselves, well, that's just what I'm feeling right now. And then on the other side, it's like, something really beautiful happens in your life and you're really happy and you're really joyous. And it's like this pendulum swing from both sides. And, for the most part, what like yoga and the Eastern philosophy says, it's like you have to stop this pendulum, and you have to be able to then center yourself and neutralize yourself so that you can see the influence and the play of both sides. And so that if you were to really bestow upon yourself a sense of enlightenment, that you choose to not participate in the swing, and that you can be an observer of what the good is doing and what the evil is doing. And then your influence as a human being is not to be swayed from one side to the other. And I think that's like, it's one of the most challenging things. And it's this idea of the middle path, right? And a lot of this goes into Buddhism of like, the fourfold truth and the eightfold path, and, what it takes to enter into this like Buddhahood of consciousness is following the sense of neutrality. But there's a divisiveness around that because of an overt sense of fulfilling desire, right? We have from the time we're young to as soon as we get into adulthood, we have these unfulfilled desires. So how much money we want to make, the type of partner we want to have, the house we want to live in, the cars we want to drive, what we want to utilize to entertain ourselves. And, what a lot of yoga points towards is that there's something inside of you that is so innately powerful that it totally fulfills all of your worldly desires, and it's within your heart. And it gives you a connection to divinity, where divinity itself comes through and goes, your desires are fulfilled. You don't need to even strive for any of those things. You will be fully taken care of. Walk on your path and trust through this guidance, and whatever you need will show up.
Yeah, and it definitely works like that, and that's definitely how my life has worked, and I'm super grateful, and so, but what I want to throw in though is like that middle path, right? Like, let's give some credit to some of the Western mystics, like,
Yeah.
Nietzsche, Terence McKenna. Like, there's, been some like really powerful shepherds in the West as well, right? And like Schopenhauer is another dude who comes to mind, right? And so something you said reminded me of Schopenhauer. Two points I kind of want to make. One was the Schopenhauer perspective of like how he said if one ages gracefully, that one of the benefits of old age is the tempering of those passions such as desire and stuff. And then like he kind of says like when you're young, that's when those passions for like wanting and desire and power and all of this stuff are at their highest. But if you age properly, he kind of has this theory that he breaks down life into different sections, and there's a way of being to maximize the greatest yield in terms of well-being during each chapter of your life. And he does talk about this thing extensively about like the gift of old age. If you followed the steps of your life adequately, one of the gifts of old age is being able to kind of fall back into yourself in this new profound sense of isolation, because you do not have these big flames of passion and desire. So I think that's an interesting thing, that like kind of the natural way of a life path is such that if you age gracefully on your journey, as you get towards the end of the journey, you get to explore some of these things that people like you and I are exploring now. Naturally, that's a gift that you get to do that as you age, even if you don't kind of take the path that we've decided to ask the questions before we enter into that chapter of our life. And then another interesting thing is just like Carl Jung's concept of the shadow, right? Like you can't really, I believe that you can't access the middle path without dabbling in the dark path and dabbling in the light path, of course, but you have to have dabbled in the dark path, right? Like, um, so a lot of my music videos have occult symbology, right? And taken at face value, it would be seen that I'm actually fighting for the darkness. But the truth is, I'm using the darkness to express my light as a way of owning the darkness I know that is within me. And so I have a friend who comes from a particular subset of Christianity. It's a pretty niche denomination. And he mentioned to me that he can't watch my music videos, right? Because he says because of all the occult symbology that like he can't. And I can't help but notice this trend of like people who tend to look away from the darkness embody the darkness the most,
Hmm.
right? So like this friend of mine like struggles with drugs and has been in and out of rehab and just like his life is not nearly as wholesome and grounded as mine. Like he really struggles and he like will live out these kind of evil situations in his life, but then he won't watch anything if, the visuals are too evil looking. And it's like almost this superficial kind of poo pooing of something that if he actually took the time to kind of like watch and listen to what I'm expressing, like my whole message, my whole message that is that being a good person is not a way of showing up in the world. Rather, to be a good person is a way of looking at the world. And that's really consistent with my music, my words, and, the kind of story I'm trying to show. So I think you have to be willing to confront your darkness in order to know your propensity for evil, like unequivocally, no matter how intrusive and embarrassing it might be to admit that you have these dark thoughts or have done these dark things in your life in order to find that balance, to live that middle path where you can then, yes, be an observer and stay grounded in the face of this pendulum.
Yeah, because I think uh, there's a lot of temptation, right? Like that's the temptation of like getting away with things. Like think about when we're kids and like stealing things or breaking things and like
Yep.
that like thrill of like, oh my god, I'm doing this like bad thing, but it feels so
Hurting
good to do.
animals, man. Like,
Yeah, and so like I think it's like facing the temptation of doing things that uh, without consequence, right? So I think that's like a lot of what like evil is. It's that you can exercise this power over someone or something. You can take from them. You can abuse them. You can totally destroy everything without considering any consequence. Like because whatever position of power you might think you're in, that there is no consequence, and that can be really intoxicating. And so like the temptation of diving into that can be super strong. And even with like overt drug use, right, that like there is this lacking sense of consequence, like what consequence is going to show up years down the road that I just never really thought of, because in the moment I'm only feeling really good. I'm
yeah, it's an
only
appetite.
feeling, yeah. So I'm satiating this sense of temptation without thinking of consequence. Where even in looking at the overt good of what kind of selfishness can come out of like thinking that everybody needs me and all the good that I'm doing and what I'm
Savior
donating, and
complex.
yeah, that there's always going to be there's always going to be a consequence to the extreme. And so to place yourself in the middle of it and to observe and be like, oh, okay, there's just a good balance that can be had, right? Where like I'm not gonna go so far down into a road of temptation and addiction and abuse, because I could die. I can lose my life. I could lose, significant people in my life, and I can lose my job. I can lose my house. Like it's just like the spiral of destruction, where the initiation of maturity is dabbling in that and coming out of it and being like,
Yes.
oh yes, okay, that helped me become a more mature, more centered person, because
Yes.
now I see what, I should, like, I know what not to do.
Yeah.
And then there's wisdom in that, right?
Yeah, like, and I think this is how we should age, right? Like, you're young, you kind of like you're hurting people, and then but you rationalize it because they hurt you first, or it's a form of self-defense, or like, what do you expect me to do? And then you kind of grow out of that, and you're like, man, that sucks that I was hurting people, like, and I don't think it's just really tricky though, bro, because it's like, so a way I see this coming up, like being specific and less abstract, right, is in Western society, you see a lot of people who have subverted their morality for the law, right? So
Hmm.
they see the law as a moral code, right? Like, so for example, um, you know, I think of like the analogy of like having a dog that's a rescue and is reactive, and you're taking this dog for a walk. um you know Somebody walking by with their dog off leash, like, they can just let their dog approach you, and if you're like, hey, my dog is reactive and nervous, I'd rather if your dog didn't approach my dog, they could be like, it's not against the law, it's a free country, my dog can go wherever they want. Like, they're leaning on the law as their moral code, as opposed to just being a good reasonable person, like, oh man, that sucks, let me give you space, maybe we can work up to the dog's meeting because my dog really wants to meet your dog. Instead of just having that goodness and
Hmm.
hearing, it's just like, no, the law is this, therefore I'm in the right and I'm doing the right thing and I'm a good person and you're a bad person for asking me to do something, that I don't have to do legally. And I see that all the time in Western society. And it's this weird thing. And then to tie it back to what you were saying, like, is that by design? Right?
Hmm.
Like, have people kind of been shepherded into, as opposed to thinking for, right, because you think of the Abrahamic religions are like, don't worry about morality, follow our rules, and our rules is the epitome of morality, right? But like a lot of Eastern religions and just like universal spirituality, right? Because I tend not to abide by a specific religion. I kind of cherry pick and then, have my own experiences that I go by, my own psychedelic experiences and mystical experiences. And I think that it's this like indoctrination into following the rules makes you a good person. And then that goes from the religious rules, right? And then it's also like the governments of the West were kind of founded with these kind of with this religious substrate in the first place. So that's kind of tied into the way we govern things here. Whereas this expectation that I'm a good person doesn't question and follows the rules. And I think this is where really good people are not trying to be evil. They're trying to be good people, but by not being able to break out and zoom out of this kind of mechanism where they've subverted their morality for a set of rules, they are controlled by evil people who understand these principles, right? And I think a lot of the danger doesn't come from people overtly being evil. In fact, a lot of the times they're trying to be good people, but it's from this kind of lack of questioning and this general state of inaction and autopilot where then they're getting used by the evil people to like hurt, the free thinkers.
Yeah, and it's a trip to think about, right? Because we want to think that we have anonymity and that these kind of like psychological controls aren't happening, and that what we've adopted from authority figures, if it's a religious authority figure or a teacher or like the law itself, politicians, whoever, parents, um, that the morals and the ethics that we've adopted from these institutions are steering us in a good direction. And I wonder if, like, kind of looping back to the beginning of the conversation where I mentioned like these Abrahamic religions are gearing towards amplifying catastrophic world events to bring their Messiah, that like a part of that has that psychological control. Because if they know that, like, well, if we get people to think this way, they're going to act this way. And if they act this way, it's going to be in accordance to the kind of catastrophes that we want, so that, they're participating in the fulfillment of this prophecy, whether they even know it or not. And so to have then agency over yourself, to unplug from that and be like, you know what, I don't want to participate in this anymore, and I want to seek out my own connection with spirituality and divinity, and to find groups that are doing something that is different, that does have a grounding in science, it does have a grounding in a religious sense, but it is much more holistic, and it's actually going to contribute to something beneficial, rather than for me to just, out of my own blind faith, to follow these teachings that, inherent within it is this apocalyptic sense of bringing forth more destruction.
Yeah, man, it's a nasty thing, and this, this is why I do respect Zoroastrianism, right? Like, so Zarathustra, the Zoroastrian prophet, who kind of predates all the Abrahamic, he does predate all the Abrahamic religions.
Yeah.
He said, like, he had this really kind of purified motto, of like good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. And I think the issue is people are ignorant, my man. They just don't know what they don't know, and they
Mm-hmm.
don't question things, and there's a missing sense of curiosity because they're trapped in this survival mode and this artificial competition. Like, oh, my friend just got a new car. Oh, damn, he can't see me in my old car. I got to get a new car. Like, and they don't even know they're trapped in this kind of material acquisition slash power hierarchical structured battle, almost like a gladiator ring that the common man has been placed in, and they don't even realize it. And it's because they're just not questioning these things, man. And so, but the people, the spiritual leaders, have a deep understanding of these principles. They know that, like, based on what you're thinking, right? And this ties into actually something I wanted to bring up, which was, like, Zarathustra said, good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. But, a kind of way that I've evolved that for myself was, you know, good thoughts for yourself, right? Because when you're thinking, you're just communicating with yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
have good thoughts for yourself, have good words for them, because when you're speaking to people, right? So good thoughts for yourself, good words for them, and good actions for all of us, for us. Because when you act, that affects yourself as well as the people around you. And I think understanding this, right? It's like, am my thoughts good? Are my words good? Are my actions good? Like, right? So it just goes back to what I was saying. Like, one of my major messages is being a good person is not a way of showing up in the world, it's a way of perceiving the world, right? So if you're not questioning your perception and you've lost that sense of curiosity because you're stuck in this rat race, you're very easily manipulated by people who understand this thought, words, actions kind of pathway, right? Because if they can
Mm.
plant the thoughts in you, then you guys are going to talk about the thoughts and you're going to act on those thoughts. And then by affecting your thoughts, we can affect your actions. And by affecting your actions, we can maneuver reality.
Makes sense. And I, like, the challenging part is the conviction, right? Like, the challenging part is then, how do you go into the worlds and the lives of people who are struggling, and have them uplifted into understanding that the struggles that they go through is self-imposed and externally imposed, and that there's a degree where they've brought that onto themselves, and the world outside of themselves has brought it out through, where they live, and the conditions that they live in, and the people around them, and the opportunities. And so this opportunity to have like an awakening experience, where then the power that is being kind of like siphoned from these organizations can be taken back. And, for me personally, it can be as simple as like, what are you buying on a regular basis? What kind of foods are you eating? What kind of like entertainment are you spending your money on that you don't need to spend on? Start with something tangible and then work yourself deeper from there, where if you know that, okay, eating healthier food is going to give you better energy, watching what kind of entertainment you're investing in is going to help with, the health of your mind, then, what kind of people are you engaging with? And, I think, there's this like self-deprecation or self-deprecating view of, well, I'm nobody, like I'm just a piece of shit. So I'm just going to, all I know is being around people who are pieces of shit. And what it takes to make those little adjustments in your life to then look at the people who are in your life and go, okay, I can see how they are all being manipulated by the system, and they're in the throes of consumption and materialism and just like innate suffering through it. How do I take a step back gradually? Because I think a lot of people think that they have to just like make this overt change overnight, and they have to change everything, that they have to change all the foods that they eat. They have to stop smoking, stop drinking, stop doing this, stop going here, stop seeing this, stop. And it becomes so overwhelming. It's like, oh yeah, of course, if you have like an immediate 100%, 180 degree flip of lifestyle, it's going to be jarring, but you can do these things one step at a time. You can have, the gradual shift allow you to like smoothly transition into a new version of yourself.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really great thing to put out there, because you can start really small, man. Start buying sodas that don't have sugar. Buy the zero sugar sodas, like just the tiniest. It's like the butterfly effect, right?
Yeah.
I think people they set their expectations so high, and they get overwhelmed, and they notice all the things they're doing wrong and could be doing better. But I think I mean, I know even in the yoga tradition, it's like it takes years to become a master, right? It's not like it takes years. Like you're like with some dude, and then you have to spend years to get him to even notice you. And then when he notices you, he gets you to do like random shit for another 10 years. And then you spend 10 years teaching someone, and then maybe after 10 years he's like, okay, you can be a guru now. Like it's like a crazy process. So you don't overnight enlighten. Like it's a life's work. That's why it's the great work.
Yeah, exactly. And the system that we've been kind of scrutinizing has like built-in safeguards, right? Like it has like a mechanism to preserve itself, and it's really shows up in the people that are around us, especially like with especially like the culture of drinking and drugs, and where a lot of people have their like little clique of friends that they go out, and every weekend they go drinking. Like there's a culture and a state of mind that is upheld. And if soon as one person starts exercising self-awareness and is going like, whoa, I don't think I should be in this anymore, it's like the whole group turns on them, and it's like, what are you talking about? Like, and then there's this like self-preservation of the ideology and the beliefs and the behaviors. And suddenly everybody turns on you. It's like your family, your friends, like suddenly you're completely isolated.
Yeah, been there.
Yeah, and that is a huge initiation point. Like that
Yep.
is a blessing. Like that's where people need to understand. It's like when you start exercising that self-awareness and you're pulling away from something that is inherently toxic and you're wanting to make lifestyle changes, that there is a decision that initiates these planting of these like spiritual seeds, and as soon as you do that 180 flip and you turn, you're facing a whole new world, and that's where all these new people show up. And there's an opportunity where you'll see someone in your life where you're like, you know what, I think I can bring them with me. I think I can bring this person with me. I think they'll accept the seeds of changing their lives. And suddenly, like, your initiation into this better life now blossoms into a purpose of helping people. And you're like, you know what, it worked for me this way, I wonder if it'll work for these people too. And suddenly you start having an effect on your community.
And that is such a great place to be. And sometimes it might not work. Sometimes you might be faced with resistance,
Oh yeah.
and that's okay too, right? Like, and again, it's just like people who are on the brink of making that change, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, go easy on yourselves, because it's weighted against us, right? Like the music we're listening to, the books we read, the commercials, the food, like almost every single point of perception has been corrupted by this society. And so just go easy on yourself. It's very, very difficult. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to notice that almost every single song that's on the radio is propagating a recycled, terrible ideology of like drugs, killing, death, and just
Yeah.
it's absolutely brutal. Whether it's satanic or not, it's definitely not towards life and love, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's in the TV shows. It's so you got to be careful. Like if you're watching it and you're willing to expose yourself to that stuff, like I like to expose myself to stuff as a storyteller, even if the storytelling is not off the light. I can still like I really respect The Weeknd and his music and his art. Like I do, I respect the juxtaposition of his lyrical content and his music and his beautiful voice and his dark lyrics. Like I see there's a
Mm-hmm.
magic in that, and I can watch that, and I'm kind of like unbrainwashable at the point I've come to, right? Because I can just see how it was constructed. I see it like I'm looking at the blueprint. I'm not looking at the result, and
Yeah.
I think that's not an easy place to get to, you know. And I think so what I'm trying to say, I divulged a little bit there, but what I am trying to say is that, yeah, go easy on yourself if you want to make the change and you're feeling overwhelmed and isolated and everyone's turning on you. And right, like once you put on the goggles, you can't take them off, type of thing.
Yeah.
And just be patient and know there's like tons of us, and that number is in our ranks, and our roster is getting stacked with each passing cycle right now. So there's a lot of hope. I have a lot of hope, man, for us.
Yeah, I agree. I think that be a good place to finalize this episode. Yeah, what I like to do is I keep myself open to just communication. So anyone listening, feel free to email me or message me on Instagram, and I'm gonna assume likewise with Zarnoosh, because I think there's a point where, at least in my own world, where I really love being helpful and I love having these conversations and I love people reaching out, with like, a little bit of boundary of like, I'm not going to spend all my time trying to help like the one person. But from what I found, just opening myself up in these kind of lines of communication, people are generally respectful, and, they have amazing questions. And, so, to me, I think, these kind of episodes are really great for community building. And so that, our voices aren't the only thing that's heard in this, and that, people want to, also share presence and, be a part of something greater. And I think episodes like this can be really helpful to get people to make that decision to step into something greater than themselves. So Think with that, Zarnoosh, if you want to just express, where people can find you, I'll have links for everything, of course, in the description.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys can reach out to me on Instagram at zarnoosh.fire. Also, I've got a couple music videos on zarnoosh.fire at YouTube, and I've also got some songs on Spotify under my name Zarnoosh right now, and that would be the best place to check me out. Currently, I'm working on another batch of new music to put out, and I cannot wait to share that with you. I've really taken the time to polish these songs as best as I can and harness my message and my musicality. And I'm really excited to show you guys what I've got coming up. It's pretty much a whole new rebrand.
Excellent. So looking forward to it, man. Thank you all for listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Enjoy.